January 22nd, 1996, Edith Carter.
Okay, Mrs. Carter, so you and these women are in the barn, and there's how many women with you?
Well, I don't know how many were there. Altogether, when we left, we were still about 650, something like that, maybe about 600, because they died. Very, very many died there. For instance, I went out in the morning from that barn, and went out and took off whatever I had on, and in the snow, in the cold, it was February then already, you know, and tried to kill the lice which I had out in the when I was standing out there in the snow, because otherwise they were eaten up by lice. It was so bad. And once there was a baby born there in that barn. I never ever even wanted to think about that anymore. And that baby, the SS woman took that baby. She took that baby to herself, for herself. She took that baby from that girl. I don't know whatever happened to that baby. But she took it. She said she's going to take it. That it was unbelievable. But anyhow, then at the very end, it was for 6 weeks we were there, and then one nice day they said that we had to leave immediately because the Russians are so close by already. And so they chased us out from there again. Whoever there was, I don't know how many we were. And we went, we marched, and as we marched on the roads there were already fleeing the German farmers from all over, the German people, in wagons with their families, and they were all fleeing because they wanted to get away from the front, you know. And this, our column which marched, you know, there were so many who just simply couldn't do it anymore. So wherever somebody was left behind, they shot them immediately behind, because they were in the front the SS and in back SS with us in that column. And it was one of the nights, one of this late at night, when simply we couldn't go anymore. And there were 6 of us who somehow stayed behind. It was dark, it was already at night. Somehow stayed behind, and they didn't notice us. And we couldn't go anymore, so we, all 6 of us, we went into a ditch, and we stayed in that ditch there. And a worker of a farm, which was close by, very close by, saw us in that ditch. He was a Polish worker, and he told us should come with him. And we went with him, and he told us we are leaving, the Germans, not we are leaving, but the Germans are all leaving in the morning. The farmer with his whole family and everybody is going to leave. You stay in the pigsty now here, and you take off your clothes, your striped clothes, but we had the civilian coats, you know. We stick out and just put under the straw someplace that nobody sees it, your clothes, the striped clothes, and you stay here. And in the morning, you walk behind the fleeing carts with this, and as if you would belong to it. That's what he told us at the time. And he went and he brought us his bread. He had his supper. It was a piece of bread, a big chunk of bread, and something, I don't know what it was, whether it was speck or something else to it. And we had something to eat. And we stayed there. And in the morning, as the farmer left, we did what he told us to do, and we walked behind there like if we would belong to it, you know. At a distance, we walked along on that road. But it wasn't very far that we went, we were very hungry, and we had one girl was a Viennese, and she was kind of a very common girl, but she had a lot of courage, and there were some soldiers coming, and they were speaking German with an Austrian dialect, and she recognized it, and she started to talk to them, and the soldiers asked where we are going, and we told them that we have to follow our column. No, that was not before that already. Before we met these soldiers, we were hungry, and we went into a farm there, and asked the farmer to give us something to eat. And the farmer was a Polish Volksdeutscher, you know, one German Polish man. He called the field police. And the field police came on horses after us to that farm. He didn't give us anything to eat. The field police came and chased us out from there, and he said, you go and you have to catch up with your column. They are in the next place here where you go. You're going to catch up with them. And they rode with on the side of us for quite some time, and then they left, and they thought that we are going there. And that's when when those soldiers came. There were three soldiers or something like that, and that Shari was her name, and she started to talk to them and told them that we have to go to the next village or whatever it is, and we have to catch up with that column of ours. They were supposed they wanted to lead us into the sea. That was the aim, you know. And he said, no, 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 no. We are leaving this place here now. We are evacuating everything because the Russians are going to be here any time. You go in here and into that farm, and you stay there. There was a small place, you know, and on farms they have very often a small building where the old owners usually live, you know, the old farmers live there when they retire, when they can't work anymore. And so in this place there were all around the big room were cots where the soldiers had slept, and he told us, you stay here, and very soon the Russians will come. We are leaving. And it was warm in the place, and there was even some hot cereal or something they had there. And you see, he told us to close the shutters. That's what we did. And for the first time, we were warm, and we lied down, and very early in the morning, we heard already the very rattle of the heavy artillery. The Russians were coming in, and they are the ones who liberated us. That was the end. And we were 6 starved young women there, and all these Russian soldiers, and that was a place where they sent a lot of Russian criminals, because that was the real worst front up there, you know. It was very, very bad when the Russians came. And again, there were 2 British, and I think there were 2 French, 2 British and 2 French prisoners of war who came, who saw us there, and who took us, loaded us on a cart, on a wagon, and took a horse from the farm where we were, and wanted to take us away from there, from the front, because we were all sick and couldn't go on anymore. And on the way to the next town, the Russians took us that horse away, so those 4 guys pulled us into all the way into that next town. I think it was Neustadt, I'm not sure what it was, and straight into the hospital. And it was a hospital. There were Polish, German and Polish Volksdeutsche again, nuns, Catholic nuns, who ran that hospital. It was a small hospital. And they were not very happy that we came, and they were sorry that we were still alive. We all 6 of us had typhoid in a very, very bad way. And this is how we survived. We know none of us thought that we ever get out of there. And they didn't give us even to eat there. When we got a little better, when I was a little better, I remember it was on the first floor. I went out the window and got from the Russian field kitchen some soup so we would have something to eat. And then eventually, when we were little, but I don't know how long we were there, we were quite a while there, because we didn't get away until sometimes in March. And we got March. They put us then on a train that we should go to Bydgoszcz, that's Bromberg, Bydgoszcz in Poland, where there was a repatriation camp for all the people who returned from concentration camps. And this is where they put into groups the Czechs, the Poles, the Austrian, the Greeks. There were Greeks there, and all according to nationalities, they were supposed to put us together. Then from there we were then supposed to be shipped off. So the 6 of us were on that train to go to Bydgoszcz, and again, Dida and I, the 2 of us, went in a station off the train to get some soup again from everywhere there were these soup kitchens from the Russian soldiers, you know. And we went for the soup, and we came back, and the train was gone. So Dida and I, we were the 2 of us standing there at that station. There was nothing but soldiers around. And what to do? What are we going to do? So the station master was very nice. He locked us into the office in the evening, and he said, you stay here in the morning, I put you on the train, and you're going to go to Bydgoszcz. So we slept, Dida and I, we slept on top of the desks there that night. And in the morning he put us on a train, but it was already a different train. That was a train filled with soldiers going home. And we got to Bydgoszcz. You know, Dida was such a beautiful girl. I still had all the signs still from this. After all that time, still I was in bad shape. The Dida was such a beautiful girl. She was younger, much younger than I still. And one of the soldiers gave us some money that when we get onto Bydgoszcz, that we can get something to eat. I don't know whether I told you what we did on the way to that camp. She had the money. We went past the first bakery and got ourselves a piece of sweets. That was the first thing we spent money for. And we went to that camp, and if you ask me, I don't know anything anymore about for how long. Not for very long. We were sent to Katowice. That is already close to the Czech borders. And they were still fighting in Czechoslovakia. They were still not freed. They were not. There was this the agreement between Stalin and Roosevelt and and the British and Churchill, how far the American can go and how far the Russians can go in Czechoslovakia. So Czechoslovakia wasn't all freed yet. So we stayed there for some time in Katowice, and in Katowice already there was a Dr. Beck. He was a physician from Prosnitz, from a town right very a neighbor town from Olmütz, from where I came from. And a very nice man. He was there with his son. They survived. And he helped us. And from there, then, after a few days, he sent us to Slovakia. And we were in Slovakia for quite a while still. And not until in May did we get to go on. Because not until in May was Moravia and Bohemia freed for for anybody to come back. I don't remember anything about that camp in Slovakia anymore at all. It was Russians, only Russians there already. But then on a truck, Dida, that girl who lives in Israel, and I, and another one of the 6 girls, went on the truck. Dida and Vera were from Bohemia, and that truck, that driver drove to Bohemia through Olmütz, and he dropped me off in Olmütz. And I had a pair of blue jeans on and a checked flannel shirt from that farmer where we stayed at last. That's how I was dropped off on the main street in Olmütz. Didn't know what to do, where to go to. I had one cousin of my mother's who was in a mixed marriage too, and he survived. I thought he survived because they were only sent in the very last few months. They were sent, the Jewish parts of mixed marriages were sent to Theresienstadt. So I went to that place where they used to live before we left. He wasn't there until they told me he lived someplace in a suburb. And I walked and walked and walked and got to them. And they were there. And the worst of all was that nobody had come back. Nobody. I was the only one who came back. That was the worst part of all. So yeah, that's the picture.
So then what did you do in Olmütz?
Why? I went to a repatriation camp. There was a girls' school, a college, and that they had equipped for repatriants, And I was there for maybe just for 2-3 days. And then I went to a cousin of mine who was from a mixed marriage too, who was in Olmütz, stayed with her for a few days. And right afterwards I got from the city of Olmütz, they gave me the keys to my father's property because that was emptied out, everything. The Germans had to leave, all the Germans had left. And so I went there and I took with me that uncle that had survived, that cousin of my mother's, with his wife. I stayed in my father's home. They had made out of that one house, they made 2 apartments, the Germans. And I lived downstairs and I gave him the upstairs and lived upstairs. And then I was hoping I was hoping and praying that my brother maybe and my brother-in-law and my husband would come back. But nobody came. And then a few people who came back, came every day out to my place and we sat together. We couldn't sleep. Nobody could sleep. Nobody could do anything. We talked and talked. Who is back and who is not back? There were just a handful of people who had come back. I found out that my brother was no more going to come back. My brother-in-law died on the march back, on the very march at the end of the war, on the march back, he died. And I was still waiting for my husband to come. And friends of mine, Gentile people, urged me that I should start again to build up the business, you know. It was the equipment was there, but everything else was empty and nobody was there. And they gave me money, large amounts of money, that I should buy the raw material and that I should start. And I started together with this uncle of mine and a friend who came from Slovakia. He lived in Slovakia. They were in the same business, you know. And he came, he said, you can do it, you can do it, you have to do it if Ernst comes back, that you have something to start with. And so I started. And for months and months and months, we worked there, and we were very successful because after the war, the kind of what we did, we had a distillery, and that was like gold, you know, when I had the raw material to work with. And after months and months later, I just by chance found out that my husband is not going to come back, because still trickling coming in from Germany, people who were not physically not able to undertake that trip back home, you know. And one day in the evening, we were again sitting there, and the bell rang out at the gate. I went to the gate, and a young boy was standing there. He was a friend of my youngest brother, Peter Fromovich, and I was so glad to see him that he came back, you know. And I said, Peter, hi, and took his hand, and he had no thumb. I said, what happened, Peter? How come? What happened? He told me that was when Ernst was killed. This is how I found out about my husband. He was killed in that camp where he was by American bombs. They bombed the place because it was they put the barracks for the prisoners, you know. They put them in the middle of the factories, so that they maybe would not be bombed, but they had to bomb them anyhow. This is how my husband died. And that's about it. And that was the end, and it was the worst part of my whole life to know that I was there by myself.
Then how long did you stay then in Olmutz before you came?
Long, because I didn't want to do anything. The first, my husband had one sister who was married to a physician, and who had emigrated to Australia. They lived in Melbourne, and the moment they found out that I was back, they sent me a landing permit to come to Australia. But I didn't want to go. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to do anything anymore. And eventually, that was already then in 1945, 46. In 45 I came back. 46, and even at the end of 46 was that already. And then I corresponded with some other people who found out that I was back. A cousin in New York who found out that I was back, and she wrote me. And I wrote her and said whatever became, in my letter, whatever became of Gustav Carter. Gustav Carter was Ernst, my husband's favorite cousin, who had gone in 1938, I told you, to the United States on the World's Fair to buy for his businesses. And I asked her, I said, whatever became of Gustav Carter and his wife and the children, because his wife and his children were left over in Belize, in Poland, you know. And she took that letter and sent it to Gustav, who was in Cincinnati. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, he had found, after searching for several years, his 2 children in an orphanage in Samarkand, in a Russian Ural, in an orphanage. The 2 little girls were found through the Red Cross and through all that effort that he all these years had put in. They found these 2 little girls in that orphanage, and his wife Anna was dead. She died long before that from hunger. And the 2 little girls were taken to that orphanage. And Gustav had brought these 2 little girls. They came to the United States in I'm not sure, I have to look that up. It's in 1943 or 1944. They came as the only case that these 2 little girls were brought with an American soldiers on a warship to New York. And they called my husband up and said, we have 2 girls here. They're supposed to be your girls, but we doubt that they're your girls. Your girls are 8 and 9 years old or 10 years old. These little girls are not more than 5 and 6 years old. So my husband immediately went to New York and found the 2 girls. And this is how Gustav, in the meantime, when he found out that I was back, he immediately got in touch with me. He started to write. And then he sent his brother, who had come back from Auschwitz, who survived Auschwitz, and was in a camp, in a repatriation camp, waiting for his papers in Prague, for my second husband, who was supposed to send him the papers that he can come to the United States. So he sent him to me. Then he sent another cousin over. And this was for and back. And one nice day, Gustav came over himself. And this is how I finally wound up here. And I had a new family, the 2 girls. This is what happened.
Okay, we should stop here.
That's in Utrecht, and I don't know how confused I was when I told you all that. I have no idea.
That's good. Did you